Wow, never thought it was going to happen this soon, but very, very great.
The whisper that froze Nashville. It was supposed to be a night of unity. The Grand Ole Opry's 100th anniversary had all the makings of a historic celebration. Veterans of country music brushing shoulders with fresh-faced newcomers, the lights of Nashville glittering in harmony, and cameras from every major network capturing what should have been a tribute to endurance, legacy, and family. Reba McEntire, one of the genre's most beloved icons, walked into that celebration dressed in her signature grace. But there was something in her eyes that longtime observers recognized: composure, yes, but also restraint. Not the kind that held back a tear, but the kind that had waited decades for the right moment. Then, during what was meant to be a simple press moment, Reba leaned toward a reporter and whispered 4 words. "You know what you did." That was all. No names, no context. Just a measured statement, soft in tone but sharp enough to slice through the heart of the industry. Within minutes, whispers spread faster than wildfire. Backstage staff paused mid-task. Publicists began dialing phones. Something had been released, unspoken but understood. Reba, known for her diplomatic smile and steadfast loyalty to the industry, had finally allowed a long-held truth to surface. Nashville, a town where loyalty and silence often walk hand in hand, suddenly found itself reckoning with the meaning behind a single sentence. And those who had been around long enough knew this wasn't random. It was deliberate, it was earned, and it was the beginning of a long overdue reckoning. The CMA switch that sparked suspicion. The 2001 Country Music Association Awards were expected to be a defining evening in Reba McEntire's career. Years of heartfelt ballads, relentless touring, and unwavering dedication to the craft had positioned her as the face of enduring country excellence. That year, producers planned a symbolic duet, a generational bridge, meant to honor her influence and reaffirm her timeless appeal. Reba rehearsed with elegance. Her dress was tailored to shimmer beneath the lights, and the stage was set for a moving tribute. But just before the final rehearsal, her manager received a phone call that stopped everything. The duet had been canceled. No explanation, no apology. When the official schedule was reissued, her name had been replaced quietly, without warning, with Vince Gill's. At first, her team believed it must have been a clerical error. But as the details settled, the truth emerged. It wasn't a scheduling fluke or a creative redirection. It was a political maneuver. Vince Gill, by that point, had become one of the most influential voices in the Opry circle, respected, charming, and firmly embedded in the network of decision-makers. His name carried weight, and in an industry built on unspoken hierarchies, few dared to challenge that. Reba never publicly addressed the snub. She took the stage alone, performed with her signature professionalism, smiled for the cameras, and left before the final curtain call. But those who glimpsed her backstage described something different, a calm face masking a deep wound, not because she was replaced, but because the person who replaced her had once been a friend. The experience changed her. From that moment forward, Reba no longer assumed that friendship guaranteed fairness. It was a lesson that would echo in every professional decision she made thereafter. Travis Tritt and the anthem that forgot her. A few years later, Reba found herself once again at the center of an unexpected exclusion, one that cut even deeper because it wasn't about scheduling or airtime, but belonging. In the early 2000s, Nashville buzzed with anticipation over a unifying anthem, a collaborative song featuring the biggest names in country music. The concept was straightforward, a chorus of legends joining voices to celebrate the roots and resilience of the genre. Reba, naturally, was invited. She recorded Demos, cleared her schedule, and prepped to lend her unmistakable voice to the project. But before studio sessions began, the final lineup was released. Her name wasn't on it. Confused, her team made inquiries. That's when whispers surfaced that Travis Tritt had expressed concerns about including Reba. Sources close to the production revealed he had suggested the song maintain an all-male lineup, implying that REBA'S inclusion might alter the authenticity of the project. Some speculated it was about preserving a traditional image, Others believed it was about ego fear that REBA'S commanding presence would overshadow others. Whatever the reasoning, it worked. She was quietly removed, and she didn't find out from a producer or colleague. It was a friend from the studio staff who warned her privately before the media caught wind. Months later, she was scheduled to perform at a charity event associated with Tritt's circle. Reba not only committed, she even donated part of her fee to support the cause. But just days before the event, her team was informed her performance had been cut. No explanation, just a vague message saying her act no longer fit the tone. Reba didn't respond publicly, but her next interview included a line that resonated through Music Row. "We don't sing in the same key." To most fans, it was clever. To the insiders, it was a quiet declaration of principle. The quiet rift with Tanya Tucker. In the 1980s and early 1990s, Reba McEntire and Tanya Tucker were widely regarded as symbols of strength in a male-dominated country music world. Both chart-topping women supported each other on stage and off, publicly resisting the industry's pattern of pitting female artists against one another. They stood for something larger, a sense of camaraderie rarely seen at the time. So when producers began planning a televised Country Music Hall of Fame tribute in the mid-90s, Reba was a natural fit to co-host. Her reputation for grace and eloquence made her an ideal face for honoring country's roots. Negotiations were reportedly progressing until, behind the scenes, something changed. Tanya Tucker's team allegedly made a private offer to producers, exclusive access to personal footage, and tabloid rights in exchange for solo hosting duties. It was a power play, and it worked. Reba was quietly removed from the program. The news didn't come from Tanya, but from Reba's own publicist, who spotted promotional materials that no longer included her name. The removal wasn't just a professional change, it was a personal fracture. The betrayal wasn't announced, but it was felt. From that moment, the warmth between the two stars faded. At red carpet events, they passed each other without acknowledgement. Friends noted the change in Reba's tone whenever Tanya's name came up, always composed but never familiar again. The final rift came in 2014 when a star-studded all-female CMA tribute took place. Tanya led the performance. Reba, despite being one of the genre's foundational women, wasn't invited. Fans took notice, asking questions online. Tanya responded vaguely, posting, "Not everyone gets an invite to the party." No names were given, but everyone knew. Reba, once again, said nothing in public, but those who knew her privately say the hurt was lasting. In an industry where silence often masks politics, Reba's quiet distance spoke louder than any feud. Naomi Judd's memorial, a moment that broke her heart. In 2022, when news of Naomi Judd's passing shook the country music community, it was expected that Reba McEntire would play a central role in the tribute. The two shared not only years of collaboration, but a genuine friendship marked by mutual respect. Reba was invited to close the nationally televised memorial with a heartfelt performance, specifically chosen to reflect Naomi's spirit and legacy. She cleared her tour schedule, rehearsed carefully, and brought her full heart to what was meant to be a final goodbye. But just a day before the event, her team received an unexpected revision to the program. Two board members connected to the Opry had reshuffled the schedule. Reba's performance was moved earlier in the show, and her song was shortened. There was no direct explanation, no call to discuss the decision, just a revised schedule. Both board members had previous tensions with Reba, including past disagreements over her prominence in major events. Still, she showed up and performed. Her voice carried the emotion the evening deserved, but her presence vanished the moment the cameras stopped. No afterparty, no press, just quiet departure. Days later, in a podcast interview, Reba was asked how she felt about the memorial. She paused and replied simply, "That night broke my heart in more ways than one." It was a line that carried layers. Fans heard pain but also disappointment, not over screen time or spotlight, but over the loss of something more sacred, the chance to say goodbye with dignity. Those close to Reba say that moment marked a shift. From then on, she stopped treating grace as silence. She began writing, not music, but reflections. Stories once tucked away in journals slowly began surfacing, hinting that her patience with industry politics had quietly reached its limit. The tour that disappeared without a trace. Among the many stories Reba McEntire has never fully shared, one in particular remains locked in speculation: the tale of the mysterious co-headlining tour that vanished overnight. In the early 2000s, Reba had reportedly been in advanced discussions for a major concert tour alongside another country music titan. Promotional drafts were circulating, schedules were being cleared, and early marketing teasers had begun production. It was described by insiders as one of the most ambitious collaborative tours in years, two icons sharing one stage across multiple cities. But just weeks before the official announcement, the entire deal evaporated. REBA'S team received no cancellation notice. There were no disputes, only silence. The tour went ahead, but with another artist in her place. Industry chatter points fingers in multiple directions. Some speculate Garth Brooks had shifted focus and priorities. Others suggest Alan Jackson was tapped last minute. A few even believe it was orchestrated by a powerful board member within the Opry who managed acts behind the scenes. Reba never named names, but in unpublished drafts of her memoir, she wrote about a handshake that meant nothing and a stage that disappeared before the lights ever came on. For fans who followed her every move, this abrupt absence from a high-profile tour was jarring. And for Reba, it became the final signal to reclaim full autonomy over her career. From that point, she leaned more into solo ventures, television work, and the projects she could control without interference. The lesson was now clear. Loyalty in Nashville didn't always come with warning signs. Sometimes it simply vanished. A shift in strategy, from polite star to quiet force. Reba McEntire has always been admired for her grace under pressure. For decades, she maintained a public image of diplomacy, never one to engage in spats or speak unkindly, even when decisions behind the scenes tested her limits. But as the years unfolded and each silent betrayal added a new layer of understanding, Reba began to change, not in personality, but in approach. She started stepping back from events controlled by traditional gatekeepers. She launched her own production efforts, took greater creative control of her music, and chose roles that gave her space to lead without interference. Instead of waiting to be invited, she built her own stages. Insiders say she became more selective with whom she trusted, reading contracts more closely, and ensuring her team vetted every opportunity through a lens of experience. While many fans noticed Reba's shift into television and acting as a simple career expansion, those close to her saw it as strategic independence. She was no longer willing to rely on a system that had too often kept her out or moved her aside. The smile stayed, but it now carried a different kind of confidence, the kind that comes from knowing one's worth. Behind the scenes, producers and industry professionals began treating her differently. Not just as a performer, but as a power in her own right. A quiet leader who wouldn't demand attention, but who also wouldn't allow herself to be silenced again. And all of it stemmed from years of restraint, lessons learned, and dignity reclaimed not with noise, but with clarity. The industry's reaction to the whisper. When Reba McEntire uttered the words, "You know what you did backstage at the Opry Centennial," those in attendance knew immediately it wasn't a mistake or a flippant remark. It was deliberate, targeted, and more than that, it was loaded. Within hours, conversations shifted from celebration to concern. PR teams scrambled, trying to predict whether the whisper would become a headline. Artists checked in with each other, wondering if they were part of the story. But Reba said nothing more. She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. That whisper hung in the air like a haunting refrain, forcing reflection without accusation. For fans, the moment became a puzzle. Online forums lit up with speculation. Comment sections filled with timelines, quotes, and theories. But for Nashville's insiders, it was more than gossip. It was accountability. The industry that once leaned on Reba's reliability, her reliability not to stir drama, now found itself on edge. Because for the first time, she had allowed the past to speak, even if in a whisper. And in a world built on smiles and secrets, that whisper hit harder than any public confrontation ever could. Clues in the memoirs, when silence becomes a map. In the years following these events, Reba McEntire's interviews began taking on a new tone. Still warm and gracious, yes, but also more reflective, more layered. She began referencing memories with metaphorical weight. Lines like "some curtains fall early, not because the show ends, but because someone decides to cut the lights," appeared in early drafts of her personal writings. For fans and insiders alike, these weren't just poetic flourishes, they were breadcrumbs. A soft but intentional way of documenting truths that had, until then, remained locked behind years of industry politeness. In these writings, Reba never revealed names. Instead, she wrote in symbols of tour that vanished without maps, of performances that broke something fragile inside, of friendships that walked away without shutting the door. To the average reader, it might sound cryptic, but to those who followed her journey, each passage was a puzzle piece. Online communities began dissecting her words, matching lyrical clues with known events. The CMA performance that never aired, the Hall of Fame tribute she was cut from, the mysterious co-headlining tour that disappeared overnight. Reba had mastered a rare form of storytelling, one where silence tells more than confession ever could. Her fans responded not with demands for drama, but with empathy. They understood the weight of her restraint. And in those subtle sentences, Reba gave them a powerful message. "I haven't forgotten, and I haven't forgiven, but I've moved forward with grace, and I'll let the truth echo on its own." The reckoning that doesn't need names. At the end of it all, Reba McEntire never shouted. She never called names. She didn't take to social media with long rants or fanfare. Instead, she whispered 4 words in a hallway filled with lights, cameras, and legacy. "You know what you did." It was more than a personal release. It was a cultural moment. A reminder that not every story needs to be shouted from a rooftop. Some truths are louder when spoken softly, especially when they've waited 40 years to be heard. And in that whisper, Reba achieved something few in the entertainment world manage. She forced an entire industry to look inward. For decades, she had been the embodiment of country grace. The redhead with the warm voice and a heart full of Oklahoma dust. But behind that warmth was also a woman who carried every cut, every silence, every betrayal, until the moment came when she didn't need to carry it alone anymore. Whether the people she alluded to will ever be named doesn't matter. They already know, and Nashville knows, because the power in Reba's reckoning wasn't in calling them out. It was in reminding the world that legacy isn't just about records sold or awards won. It's about dignity. It's about respect. It's about what happens behind the stage lights when the music stops. Reba McEntire's career didn't just survive the politics. It rose above them. And now, she doesn't need to sing another note to make people listen.